Do you make it easier or more difficult for people? Do they have to navigate unnecessary obstacles and deal with a bunch of bureaucracy? Like, what kinds of systems do you have in place? Has your company even got, um, you know, clarified systems and processes in place? These are
Yeah.
things that can be very prohibitive from people being able to
Hmm.
easily do their jobs, and it can foster frustration too if these
Hmm.
things are just a basic pain in the butt, like to do the darn job.
Strategy is standard, but leading people, that's where the magic happens. In every organization, there comes a moment, a shift, a stretch, a choice. How do you help your people thrive? Give them the voice, the tools, and the leadership they deserve.
I'm Rhonda.
And I'm Kevin.
Welcome to the Wolfpack Rise and Howl podcast, where we talk about what it takes to lead, coach, and transform from the inside out.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. It's been a couple of weeks, but here we are, episode 7 of the Wolfpack Rise and Howl podcast. I'm Rhonda Harris, and I am joined today by Kevin Cruz. How you doing today, Kevin?
I am doing fantastic. Good morning, Rhonda.
Be nice if I knew how to pronounce your name right. Creven.
Okay. It's Thursday. It's Thursday.
Hey, Eve. It's been a minute.
Yes. Oh, it has been.
Yeah, so, so much has been going on these last few weeks, with vacation and doctor's appointments and stuff. So, yeah, it's been a minute since we've been able to do this, but I'm glad that we're back. This week, I really wanted to talk about something that popped into my mind as a result of, some of the things, as you know, that have transpired in the past few weeks, more specifically related to the types of environments that are created for employees within an organization. And, I have, I took a little bit of an issue recently with a situation that came up where, we were going to be doing some migrating some training content for our client. And, unfortunately that didn't pan out. But what really kind of struck a nerve with me was the sentiment of the leader of that organization that basically said they don't need training because they have long-term employees. And I'm going to be as gracious as I can be, but that is the biggest load of poppycock that I've heard in a while, especially for a company that is in an industry that is notoriously known for having extremely high turnover. It's just the norm for that. And there are just certain industries that just by default have high turnover. So I was really taken aback by that. I've never had someone literally just say that to me. We just don't need it because we have long-term employees. And it made me start thinking about if that's the mindset of the very top of the leadership pyramid in that company, what must it be like to work there? And so, contrast that with a different company that I've worked with for several years. They do a fantastic job of investing in developing their employees. And they are also in the same industry, by the way. And they recognize that they have high turnover. And they recognize the value of investing in people and the value of training and individual development, employee engagement. They recognize that, in order to keep good talent, you have to create an environment and a culture in which they can thrive. And I have done some work in the past where I've developed some training around there's a model called the service profit chain, and I wanted to talk about that today. Are you familiar with the service profit chain?
I am.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
well, before I go on, tell me what's your perspective on the service profit chain?
Well, if it's the same service profit chain that I think you're referring to, first of all, it was authored or created by a couple of professors from a very notable institution of higher learning, I believe, in this country, Harvard University. And uh, and essentially what it means, and I know we're going to peel the onion back on this conversation in today's podcast or whatever, but essentially what it's saying is that in order to drive sustained positive revenue from an organization's customer base, you have to have something going on internally within that organization. And that is, and the root of it is training, obviously, but you need to have an employee base that is content, happy. All of their needs are being fulfilled with regards to being able to do good work, if you will. Um, and so basically, it starts from the inside out. You have to have certain basic things going on within the organization in terms of, you know, the employee feeling like they're valued, that they have all of the tools within their toolkit in order to perform their jobs to an optimum level. Um, and so that inward satisfaction of the employees' intrinsic value and worth in performing their job within that organization will translate, if you will, into better service, better work quality, which will yield a more satisfied customer, a customer that will want to stay within that organization to receive their services or goods because of that experience. So it's a relationship, if you will, between the internal staff, if you will, and the external customer that yields revenue.
Yeah, well, you pretty much nailed it. Like, just really nailed it. I'm not going to elaborate on that too much more because that's pretty much the gist of it. It's from the inside out.
And there are a lot of little very important details with that go along with that or whatever. And I know that you're going to be speaking to in today's podcast.
I'm going to just run through each of the little links in the service profit, and what I will do for the audience. If you're watching this on YouTube, I will include a link to the Harvard article about it, so you can take a look at it for yourself. But basically, I'm just going to speak through the major links in the chain. So, like you said, Kevin, internal service quality. Um, that is the beginning of the chain, and that is the the things within the control of the organization to do in terms of creating that environment. It starts there, and training is one aspect of it. There's so much more to that. We talked about onboarding, I think, in our very first episode. What is that employee's impression and their experience from the first day that they start? So that's part of it. There's a lot of little moving pieces inside of each of these steps along the way that make up this overarching philosophy of the service profit chain. But basically, internal quality. What kind of a place are you creating for employees that makes them want to be there and anxious to enthusiastic, rather, not anxious, enthusiastic about coming to work every day and performing their jobs, just like you said. So that's the first one. Then it goes to the next link, which is employee satisfaction, because it's that internal service quality, that environment that begets the level of satisfaction that employees have. And then that also can result in higher rates of employee retention and productivity. Now, as you know, if you have high turnover, which is where this conversation began, we don't need training, we have long term employees. If you have high turnover, you're not retaining folks. Think of the loss in productivity. If you have constant churn and you're constantly having to train people to come into the role, and they've got to come in and learn how to do things and learn, it's unrealistic to expect people to come in and know absolutely 100% of everything about any new job. Even if you're coming into a role that is the same kind of role that you've performed at another place, there's always going to be a little bit of a learning curve. There's always going to be some adoption that has to happen. So, any amount of that is going to translate into at least some level of an impact on productivity. So the more that you can retain your employees, especially that you've invested in them, in their training, in their development, the more that you can retain them, the better the productivity levels are going to be, because obviously the longer that you're in a job and you are satisfied with it, you become more proficient in that job. There are degrees to which people perform. Some can do things faster than others. Some can do things more efficiently than others, just because there's value to experience. Okay, so we have to take that into consideration. So productivity then creates a really good value for the customer. So we're moving on to another link here. So that external service value, what you talked about, this is the results for the customers. How do they benefit from all the good things that are happening on the inside? They're going to have a better customer experience, which is super, super important. And the more that they interact with highly engaged and satisfied employees, they are going to be more satisfied, just like you said. And then the next link, and then therefore that makes them to me be likely more loyal to that organization, just like you said. And with that, they will repeat their business, which to the next link, grows revenue, and therefore, that's how you sustain profitability. So I've gone through each of the links, which aligns with the general synopsis that you gave, the overview to begin with. But we don't have time to get into nuts and bolts of each of these things. But what I want to start with today is talking about that internal service quality. So I'm just going to run down a little checklist that's in the article. Mm-hmm. So they list 5 things that are related to the internal service quality. It's workplace design, job design, employee selection. So this goes back to making sure that your hiring practices are, effective, so that you're hiring the right people to begin with. And they put employee selection and development together on as one bullet point, but I would split that out as 2, because those are 2 different actions. Yes, you have to select the right employee, and then developing them. Now that's where we're getting into the training and coaching and, all the other things that go along with developing that employee. So I would have 6 points on this list instead of the 5. The next bullet point they have is rewards and recognition. And then, like what you mentioned, the last bullet is tools, the tools that they need to do their jobs in service of the customers. So I want to just kind of go through this because, like I was, started this conversation, having the mindset that you don't need training because you have long-term employees was just really shocking to me. And again, I want to reiterate, I will always say this: training is not the end-all be-all solution for every single thing that goes on in an organization. It just simply is not. So I have no delusions about that whatsoever. But it is a very important piece, especially when you're talking about being in an industry where you are more likely to have high turnover. You are more likely to be in the midst of new employees and new hires on a more regular basis than, say, a place where everybody's been there for, years and years. Nothing really changes. It's not a ever changing, fast paced environment. Everybody kind of knows what they're doing. Yeah, if it was that kind of a situation, I could kind of give that a little bit of a pass. But even so, in and of itself, training can be very beneficial just because of the things that are going on in the world that command the attention of organizations to pay attention to what's going on just overall from, geopolitical perspective, economic perspectives, and a whole bunch of other things. And again, not saying that training is the answer to all of that, but I'm concerned with the mindset, that fixed mindset. We don't need this, It's a telltale sign to see how much of an open mind someone has and how willing they are to examine new information and be in a place where they are open to continuously assessing their organization in service of continuous improvement. So I just wanted to throw that out there. But tell me what you know about workplace design. I have a few thoughts on that, but I want to know what is your take on what workplace design means?
I think really it's about the how the job itself is, and I'm looking at it from you know, a perspective of how one performs a particular assignment, a particular job or whatever. Is it designed first and foremost in a correct manner that it will yield what it's supposed to in terms of productivity? There are some assignments that are very poorly designed, if you will, and regardless of how well that employee is able to execute it or whatever, if it's flawed to begin with,
Now,
okay, in terms of,
are you talking about job design, which is the next bullet point?
I probably am. I am. All
No,
right.
that's okay. Go,
So
continue. Continue. You know what? Those things don't have to come in any. Go on with what you were saying.
well, but let's go back. Let's go back so we keep it in the order of how you want to present this. All right, let me take a step back. You're asking specifically about work design versus or workplace design versus the specific assignment or the job design. Now, let me think about that. For me, I think that's more. Um, it's larger, if you will, in context. Um, tell
Can
you
I
what,
take Can I take a stab at it?
why don't you give me a jump start? I
Yeah,
need a
no,
jumper on this.
that's okay. You know what? It's okay because it's not that it's not that often that things are broken down to this level very specifically, very in a very structured way. So, and not everybody is familiar with the nomenclature of these types of things. So it's totally cool. And to be fair, it's probably not fair that I threw that out at you because I actually have developed training around this, so I kind of know what it is. But I wanted to give
Well,
because you have an
let me
HR
just
background.
let me just say this for our audience. Um, these podcasts, I love them because most of the topics that we discuss or whatever, I have a lot of or some experience. In some areas, I don't, and I learn just like I guess I'm hoping a number of our folks in the audience walk away with learning something, if you will. And so this is one example of that. So please have at it.
So workplace design can mean things as simple as ergonomics. It would is what's the layout of the actual workplace? Have you? Well, I will tell you, for example, when I first moved to the Netherlands and I started working with a software company here in The Hague, I remember when they were setting up my workspace, they were so concerned with this. Is your chair okay? Is your desk the right height? They literally sent a crew up to my desk with tools and everything. And they're like, okay, well, we're here to put everything just like you like it. I'm like, what? Like, do you want us to adjust the height on your desk? Do you want us to do this? Do you want us to do that? How do you want this monitor? Can we raise the monitor? Can we do this? Can we do that? And I'm like, wow, what? Like, I'm so used
Like,
to
who
just,
does this?
right.
Who does
Like,
that, right?
I've never had anybody do that. And so I was like, no, I'm good, and they were like, oh no, are you sure? Because if you change your mind, you just call this number and we'll come up here and we'll just take, can we order you a special anything? Like, and I was just like, what I want like there's a special, things for your wrist that to rest on when you're using a mouse, or these ergonomic kinds of things. I was totally taken aback. I was like, "Oh, that's awfully nice." And it wasn't that they were being nice. It's part of the it's just the way things. It's a regulation here in the EU, like being concerned with ergonomic considerations so that people can have the healthiest possible working environment that they can, so that they don't have neck injuries and things of that nature. It's like they've thought about these details, and I was like, huh, okay, I guess that's something to be taken seriously. I'm not saying that other companies in the US don't do that. I'm sure some do. I just hadn't had that experience myself.
Well, on that note, Rhonda, I think to some degree, and this is great, I'm so glad that you're drilling down on this specific example that you've cited. I think here, maybe comparative to European organizations or whatever, I think we take that somewhat as for granted, if you will. That and I think it's even on a lot of job descriptions at the very bottom or whatever, in terms of the physical aspects of the job or whatever. But I don't think we really pay that close attention. I think it's assumed that when the person comes in, their particular workstation, their chair, their equipment, and everything is going to just, unless they say something about it. Now, if they say something about it, it's different. We can make the adjustments necessary so that they're comfortable. But unless they say something, I think we just assume that, hey, we're going to hire this person and they'll be physically okay to come in and perform their job.
Well,
So,
and like I said, it's not a diss on American companies, but it's just,
no, I know, but I think it's a mindset, though. I think it's a mindset. Yeah.
I would say, to give credit where it's due. I mean, I know that if companies are, following the ADA guidelines, for example, they will make accommodations. But like you said, it's like you have to say something about it, like even when you're filling out an application and they ask these particular questions, like, are you a vet? Do you have a disability? These kinds of things. But so anyway, so that's just one piece of workplace design. The other part of workplace design is, how easy is it? Like you mentioned something about when you were just speaking a few minutes ago, how easy is it for that person to perform their job? See, that kind of goes hand in hand. So in terms of like job design, like, which we'll come to in a minute, when I think of job design, I'm thinking, okay, anything that's related to actually identifying what key performance indicators are for completing that job, and how is that broken down, and how is that communicated to the employee, and how is it documented, and how is it measured, and how is it how do you improve performance? So it's like that piece. But as far as the workplace design goes, the physical environment, how easy do you make it for that person to actually complete that job? So I'm going to refer back to the work of Thomas Gilbert. He created the behavior engineering model, but also in reading his literature around leisurely theorems, and he wrote in his book about, this is going back, I don't know, 100 years or so. There was some research done and talking about being efficient. How many steps do you have to take between when you're carrying a bucket? It was like I'm drawing a blank. It was like it was in an industrial type of setting, and they did this research about how many steps between carrying these buckets of whatever to here and here, and how can you make that more efficient? How can you narrow that down? These kinds of specific things. What kind of a physical workplace environment? Do you make it easier or more difficult for people? Do they have to go through unnecessary steps? Do they have to navigate unnecessary obstacles and deal with a bunch of bureaucracy? Like, what kinds of systems do you have in place? Has your company even got, um, you know, clarified systems and processes in place? These are
Yeah.
things that can be very prohibitive from people being able to
Hmm.
easily do their jobs, and it can foster frustration too if these things are just a basic pain in the butt, like to do the darn job. And I will tell you that, referring back to another episode where we talked about, is training really the solution? Remember, I went off about this one particular place I worked, and they were like, "Oh, we need training because they're not doing their job properly." And come to find out, after a thorough needs analysis, training wasn't the problem. They knew how to do the job, but it was the system and the processes that they had in place that was making it a real pain in the neck and very
Hmm.
time consuming for them to do it. And then you add on top of that, now we're skipping down to another bullet point on here. They were being improperly incentivized. So therefore, they were acting accordingly, because if, in a call center environment, you got to get off the phone fast enough, or because otherwise 30% of your pay is based on your average handle time. So you're being incentivized to hurry up and rush customers off the phone. So you may not be solving their problems. So you see how all this falls into workplace design, job design, incentives, etc. And this
Hmm.
all falls
Absolutely.
under that link of internal service quality. And
Hmm.
I'm glad I remembered to pull that example in, because in that particular case, what initiated this call for training was plummeting customer satisfaction rates.
Hmm.
And it's like, and people were complaining that, every time I call up here and I have a technical issue, I'm not getting my problem resolved. So they just jumped to the conclusion, oh, well, they must need training. Well, no, they didn't, because you got terrible internal processes. You're making this job unnecessarily more difficult for them to actually do it. So that is a part of workplace design.
So Rhonda, just one quick comment following that or whatever. I think this is an example where leadership doesn't understand the correlation, if you will, between that internal, um, you know, uh, employee satisfaction in being able to perform their job versus the what it yields in terms of external customer, if you will, allegiance to that organization, and or they understand it but don't realize or think that it's important enough, if you will, to put more, stock in it in terms of investing in it.
And I know that sounds rough. That sounds like cynical. They don't care. But I mean, yeah, some leaders are cynical. Some of them have big old egos too, if you know what I mean. Um,
Well, I think it's a value proposition as well for the leader in terms of, okay, are we gonna invest? Are we gonna put the money in that or whatever? Do we feel it's important enough versus everything else, spending obviously money on technology and everything else.
but to play devil's advocate though, and to kind of let them off the hook a little bit. Sometimes I think they just lack awareness about what that actually means, because I do believe that some people just don't think about the minutia that's involved with some things that seem um obvious to some folks are not obvious. um and I think that in their desire to keep things moving forward and meet business objectives and grow revenue and da 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 da, I think they're just like, "Ugh, it's just going to take care of itself." Well, surely they
Yeah.
know what to do. Well, that should be
Hmm.
obvious. Well, they should just do whatever. Well, maybe in your mind, from your perspective, you're thinking, oh, well, that it just happens naturally. I mean, sometimes it does. Some people are innately just keen on, how to be effective and efficient, and they really know how to self direct and work through these challenges. But not
But
everybody has that level
yeah,
of motivation.
and those instances are, I would say, from my own personal experience, far and few between. I think that's taken a gamble to assume that, okay, well, we just hired this individual or whatever, and based on what we learned about them and and what's on their resume or whatever, we know they have the capacity. But as you stated very early on, and was always a pet peeve of mine, and not spending the necessary time to provide a new hire the upfront training that they need, regardless of how much experience they brought with them into that role. There's still going to be a learning curve, oftentimes a significant learning curve in terms of how it works at this organization, how your particular assignment, there's a lot of nuance, if you will, in ways of doing things. And a new hire coming off the street, I don't care how much experience they have, they're not necessarily going to be able to come in and hit the ground running at you know, and be very productive early on, because there's certain things that they have to learn within this new organization.
Oh, and let me just throw something else on there that just came to mind too. What about the person who is absolutely capable and they can figure it out and they have the ability, they have the skills, they have the foresight, they know what to do. But what do you think stops people like that from actually acting on that? Okay,
Okay.
I'll go ahead and
You,
answer the question.
you gonna give me $1 million if I get this right?
Yeah, let me go get my Monopoly set. Let me go grab that. The one that I don't
Okay.
even own. Just put it on my tab, okay?
It's been my experience that particular employee in that scenario you just set up is that it's not accepted. It's not valued because we don't do it that way here.
Well,
Okay.
and that's tied to what I was going to say
Okay.
is they are not empowered to do it.
Not empowered.
If
Absolutely.
and if your culture is a culture that doesn't reward innovation and proactivity, being proactive and taking charge, there are people who will just retract and recoil and just be like, oh, I'm not getting involved with that. I know what they need here, but I'm not going to say anything. I might get my head bit off. Imagine the type of culture where a leader makes it known that he doesn't care enough to invest. What kind of morale do you think that builds? So if people are lacking morale and the culture's kind of, repressive in a little bit of a way, and employees don't feel like they have permission to take action for fear of repercussions, then they're not going to. And that doesn't mean that they're not capable of doing it or they're not smart or they can't figure it out.
Yeah.
But if you don't create a circumstance where they're comfortable enough to do that, then they're not going to do it. So what could appear to be a lack of knowledge, a lack of motivation, could simply be I have lack of permission or I have a lack of perceived permission. And if there's not a consistent communication from leadership and from the organization at large to consistently communicate to the workforce, we value your opinion, we want you to be innovative, we want you to be proactive, we want you to always think in terms of customer first, we empower you to act on that. If that message is not clearly communicated on a regular basis, you're not going to elicit those types of behaviors that lead to people breaking down those barriers and overcoming those processes and being proactive and being intuitive and getting a grip on getting in and taking charge. Because then you might have some of these naysayers in the workplace, these workplace bullies, these managers that get uppity when someone gets a little bit too just they deem them to be a little bit too much, and they
Mhm.
squash them a bit. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, I got an example. Yeah, yeah, that's all sounds good. Thanks for sharing that. But guess what? There's no real interest in whatever that innovative idea is. So I think you hit it on the nail head. Two key terms you used here: um, a lack of innovation, or I would say empowered to be innovative, is not supported in that culture.
Right. And, one of the gold star examples is I listened to a recording a couple, 2, 3 years ago, and I'm not going to remember the gentleman's name, but, and I'm not sure if he's still the CEO of the Ritz Carlton, but he was very well known for, I think
Oh,
he, I think he gave he's like, I don't care if you're the maid, the maintenance guy, the front desk
yeah,
person, whatever. If you have
yeah,
to solve a problem for a guest, you just do it, and you have up to certain amount of money at your disposal to be able to do whatever is necessary to make it right. And you've got my permission. And
yeah.
because of that level of empowerment, they were known for world class customer service.
Another, yeah, absolutely. That one's, I think, even mentioned in grad school and talking about customer service and all. Another very good example would be Southwest Airlines, back in I think it was in the '90s, probably. Um, they were noted for also kind of going out on a limb to be very extreme about allowing employees to service the customer in terms of, hey, whatever it is that you see, whatever you can do, whatever, um, do it for the customer. And they became noted for it. They had fun with it as well. I don't know if you recall back in the day with Southwest Airlines, they were the ones that started, yeah, the gimmicks and all, and doing the announcement before buckling up and taking off or whatever. They injected humor or whatever, but that was the length that they went in terms of servicing the customer. It
I
was
do remember
valuable.
that. So basically, and all of that is wrapped into what are your systems in your company. So a system, obviously, when it comes to operations and you map out your standard operating procedures and your processes and those things, this is very much aligned with the whole workplace design component. What are you
Mhm.
factoring in along the way of your processes that make life easier for your employees? And as you know, I'm just going to call this out, take a moment to talk about where White Wolf is going in the future, coming up on our 10-year anniversary, how we're changing our service and product offering. The message is super clear now. I'm more interested in focusing specifically on how to help companies create a better workplace environment for their employees, whether it's through, providing, you know, training programs, change management, coaching, and things of that nature, even business process improvement activities, because this is all part of a big overarching system in the organization. Is how the workplace functions from a ergonomical, physical, cultural perspective. All of these things that make up the environment so that the person can then do the job, which is the next bullet point, the job design. Yeah. So, and you already touched on that about the job design, and
Mhm.
I, that, and I did too. Basically, is the job clearly mapped out? Does the person have the capacity to do that job, which ties into the employee selection piece? You know, are the person's skills and capabilities, experience, etc., tied to the job design that's designed for that role? And I just want to throw out another thing. For the love of everything good, man, take the time to create proper job descriptions and job task inventories for the jobs so that people know exactly what it is that they're supposed to be doing, so that you also have a standard of measure for the job so that you can say whether that person is actually doing the job in the manner in which it was intended to be performed, and so that you can also measure the degree to which they are demonstrating mastery of completing the tasks associated with that job. I know I'm sounding really.
Can I make a quick comment? I don't know if you saw my reaction to
Yeah, I
that.
did.
The reason why I did that is because I've witnessed at so many different organizations I've been affiliated with over the course of my career. That's a miss. And when I say it's a miss, it's known. Everybody knows that the particular job descriptions that we have in place or whatever are probably somewhat antiquated. They haven't been updated on a regular cadence, if you will. But yet, the time isn't taken, if you will, to address that because there's too many more what's perceived as more important things to do or whatever. So that's unfortunate, but it does make a difference, if you will, for that new hire coming on.
Or
Yeah.
if they do create them, they don't analyze them periodically to make sure that
Yeah,
the job description still fits changes that have happened to the organization or in the world outside.
let me just say this real quick, Rhonda. Back in the old days, because I'd been in this game for I don't want to say how many years before I retired earlier this year, but back in the old days, okay, maybe a couple of decades ago, um, us HR folks used to actually do some desk level auditing of job descriptions or whatever, where we would sit down with employees performing that assignment and the supervisor, and we would take the time and energy that was required to understand every task, if you will, that was involved in performing that particular job to make sure that it was designed, if you will, to do what it was expected to do or whatever. That was back in the old days. I hadn't seen that done in the last 15 to 20 years, maybe, before I retired. Uh, yeah.
Honestly, coming from an L&D background, it just is very frustrating each time that I have gone to, try to create some, especially new hire training. Um, where's the job description? Then there's either crickets, there's deer in the headlight look, or there's a scrambling of things, and let me get back to you and then you get something that's
Yeah.
like really totally off, and it's not really reflective of what they're asking the person to do. And then I think what really is ticks people off too, because I've heard this from folks. Everybody hates a performance review. And I don't mean to sound so negative, but it's like performance reviews can be really wonderful, amazing tools and insightful resources to help both employees and employers to really get a sense on where we are in terms of how we're performing. But unfortunately, a lot of times it's just something that has to get checked off. I can't tell you how many times I've spoken to colleagues who are like, "Oh, I'm really busy. I got to do performance reviews this week," and they're just like it's whittled down to scheduling a bunch of meetings. Someone comes in, you have a little conversation, you check off some things on some check boxes, and then you give them some kind of a grade as to how well they're doing or whatnot. And I mean, and I've seen like a hodgepodge, a mixed bag of
Yeah.
varying
Yeah.
degrees to which that is done well, either from one extreme where, you know, a person's not getting the recognition that they deserve for the things that they do over and above the job or how well they've done the job, or just across the board, everybody gets a medal. you know, and that's kind of a smack in the
Yeah,
face to the people who actually do go above and beyond, who are putting in more work. So you see,
absolutely.
it's
Yeah,
two extremes. It's like either,
yeah,
you're not getting the right, recognition, which can burn, or everybody gets everything, and then the person who really did the outstanding work doesn't. It's
yeah,
insulting to them, you know.
yeah. So, Rhonda, I'll just say this quickly because this is a topic that could be a podcast in and of itself or whatever. But I will tell you, I've been a proponent in recent years of just scrapping the annual performance review. Is That's almost like shocking. All right, you call yourself an HR professional and you're talking about scrapping what we've traditionally done. But the reason why is because of a lot of what you just shared. They're not performed correctly. Okay, and if you're not going to do it right, why do it at all? The per- Now, having said that, I really believe sincerely that uh, annual performance appraisals are very necessary. They are an invaluable tool to an organization because if they're done properly, they should support the strategic goals and objectives of the organization. Okay, there's and but that's what they're supposed to do, but they don't necessarily hit that mark because they're not necessarily um, performed. And it's an annual ritual we go through. Oh, it's time to get ready for our performance review. Let me go back and try to find stuff that I've done to support, you know, what I was being held accountable for.
Well, I'm just really curious. I mean, I have a thought about what you just said, but I'm curious to know, what would you have done in its stead?
Well, I wouldn't throw the. How does that saying go? I'm really bad with these cliche-ish sayings. Something about throwing out the baby with the bathwater. So, oh, I said it right. Thank you. No, I wouldn't necessarily want to do that in this instance. Maybe it's not as formal or whatever. I think you still have to step through the process of having goals and objectives that are evaluated along the course of the review period to make sure that people are performing and getting the results, if you will, that will again correlate to supporting the strategic goals and objectives of that department, business unit, the company at large, or whatever. But there just has to be some kind of a tweak to making sure that they are done correctly, that the process of evaluation and the rating correlates to the person performing the assignment, according to the goals and standards that were established for it. Um,
This is
yeah.
this is where I get really excited, because I have always been an advocate of continuous improvement activities. It's iterative. It's not
Hmm.
summative. Oh, let's wait to the end of the year, some review cycle, which is, about a year. It's like, who can remember what the heck was going on in January? Here it is, December or whatever. But if you take a more iterative approach to evaluating performance, you have real time, and it's more likely to elicit the ability to pivot when you need to, because you will see sooner if something's not going right. And by doing that, I feel like that more collaborative effort is not as likely to be seen as a means by which to be punitive with an employee, because I think sometimes people get really nervous. Oh, I got my annual peer review, and they're thinking, am I going to get my bonus? Am I going to get a raise? Am I going to get to keep my job? There's a lot of that fear around that, but I really think there's a much more productive way that it can go about. But it does take more time, but I think that the investment is definitely worth it if you can get people to invest the time to be more iterative and do it in real time, and build out the KPIs And if you know, you'll know on a weekly or monthly basis or whatever, you know, uh, just for simplicity, I'll say, let's say you're at a factory and you have to make the widgets. Okay. Well, we want this level of productivity to this level of quality over this period of time that these things have to get done. And that doesn't mean that, oh, it has to be a micromanaging thing. That's why I say if it's collaborative and if you can bring teams together to have a common shared purpose and objective and let the teams evaluate each other and then report those findings up to management and leadership so they can kind of keep an eye on it in a more real-time, continuous timeline. You're going to catch the flaws. You're going to enable the teams and empower the teams to be able to come together and innovate on, okay, well, we're not performing according to these KPIs. What's the root cause? What can we do about it? And what does the team say about how we're going to do that? And again, this ties back to the workplace design and the culture and the empowerment. And all these things are very, very stitched together. So, yeah, performance reviews. Yeah, more iterative. But yeah, this job design, employee selection, development, it's just, yeah. That would be my replacement for the annual performance review. I would like to see a more team-driven, collaborative, continuous improvement effort that lays the framework for iterative evaluation constantly throughout the year. Yeah, that would be my answer.
I agree wholeheartedly. Yeah.
Let's move on to the next thing. So we've talked plenty about employee development. Goes without saying, you know, training and coaching are my two big go-tos. And again, tying back with that team coaching piece too, that helps because team coaching is not only beneficial for the teams and the organization, but going through the actions of being involved in a team coaching initiative actually has benefits for the individual as well, because people learn how to become more self-aware. They learn more about themselves in terms of how they communicate with other people, how they fit within the team, how interdependent each team person can be. It helps people to identify their strengths if that team coaching is done properly, because we always want to identify and leverage strengths of each individual person. So, you know, it definitely is a means by which not just to develop teams as a whole, but to help individuals develop themselves on a one-on-one basis. And it also, and I did some research recently, it also has a way of spilling over into one's personal life because of the things that they learn about themselves. Like, for example, if they learn about a particular communication style or a strength, they can leverage that in their personal life and enhance the, you know, relationships outside of work or how they interact with their family or their friends or things of that nature. So these are very beneficial and another way to help employees feel more satisfaction if the company's investing in these kinds of things for them.
Sure.
So, and I know we're coming up on time here, but the last couple of things, employee rewards and recognition, I think that goes without saying. And I do want to say, even with the iterative version of the continuous improvement evaluation, yeah, rewards and recognition. Why not reward and recognize people throughout the year instead of waiting until Christmas and they get the jelly of the month? Remember my favorite movie, Christmas Vacation, remember? Did you see Christmas Vacation where he had his eyes on a pool. He just knew he was going to get that swimming pool. And he waits until Christmas Eve. He finds out that the boss has decided to give everybody jelly of the month.
Yeah.
Hey, we know
That's
what
not
happened.
too far off, by the way. That's not too far off of what we're talking about in the workplace. But,
right. But I mean, that's like worst case scenario, you know. But honestly, I mean, what a way to find out that you're just not going to get that reward that you thought that you were going to get. Like Christmas
Yeah,
Eve,
yeah,
everybody's, I mean, that movie is hilarious. It's like not only my favorite Christmas movie, but it's like a favorite movie in general, like hands down. I watch it every year and I laugh my butt off.
yeah.
Like
I
I'm
do
watching
too.
it for the first time every
Yeah, it's a
year.
good
I'm,
tool.
but
Yeah,
that's really speaks to, you know, what I'm saying. Like, let's make this a part of like a continuous, like, let's not have carrot stick, you know, it's like, can we not have this mentality where you're just chasing the next thing? Like, I just am
yeah,
really, really into, you know, being collaborative and iterative. And let's just keep this momentum going year
yeah.
round.
Let me just say this real quick about rewards and recognition. That's again an example of a process, if you will, that could be leveraged as a really important tool within an organization. Um, I really I commend the organization that I retired from earlier this year because the past couple of years they put together a very strategic rewards and recognition program that I saw the benefit of, and there was a lot of buy-in to it. I thought it was executed well. Certainly, there are some opportunities to maybe even tweak it more or whatever. But if done properly, if done correct or whatever, it could be another very important tool within an organization that really incentivizes staff. Um, they understand it. They see, if they buy into it and work within the process or whatever to do the work, they understand that they can be recognized and they can be appropriately rewarded at the end of the year. And it won't necessarily be the example that you cited in the movie where your expectations were, you'll be valued this way or rewarded this way, but you end up with, something entirely different that will, perhaps maybe even devalue or demotivate you. So, very valuable tool if done correctly within any
And
organization.
I want to ask you one, and what do you think about the idea too? This is another reason why I think that, you know, taking this iterative approach of continuous improvement and evaluation is because if you come together as a team and you are seeing the results because they're being measured more regularly, I mean, what a dopamine hit that is to be able to see, oh man, you know, we're hitting those KPIs. Like we got it. Like you know, I'm doing great. I'm doing very
Yeah,
well at my job. And I'm feeling
yeah,
good about it. Not just, oh, quarterly I'm going to get told, or every 6 months I'm going to get told, or once a year I'm
yeah,
going to get told I'm going to get my attaboy or whatever. And I'm not saying that, oh, things are so black and white that, you know, it's either all or nothing. I know that there are ways to, you know, recognize people throughout the year, but I think if a company is deliberate about it and bakes it into the way of doing things, I think that the opportunities for employees to have aha moments and have these moments of pride and feeling good about the work that they do because it's measured in a more regular basis are going to be more, they're going to be more often. And
hmm
I think sometimes people just need that fuel to keep going. Because sometimes,
yeah,
you know, motivation is a fleeting little creature sometimes. And sometimes you just need a little pep in your step. You need a little something extra. And sometimes
yeah.
you do want to know, well, what happened with that project that we worked on? Did you guys actually realize and actualize the things that you wanted to get out of that project? I
hmm
can't tell you how many times I've been on projects and, you know, you work your heart out, the project ends, you never hear back from anybody. You don't know how it went off. You don't know if it was successful. You don't know how that played out for the customer or the end users or the whatevers. And like, because nobody gets back to you, they just don't share that with you, and you just move on. And you're supposed to stay
It,
motivated in that kind of environment and be keep the same level of enthusiasm.
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. there is, that's where employees see a connection, an alignment, the dots being connected. Okay. I was tasked or asked to do this or whatever, and now I understand why, um, and my performance is being valued behind it. That particular project that I worked on and the contribution that I made or whatever, I see where it went, what it resulted in. And oh, by the way, I got feedback on it. And, it wasn't just a flavor of the month project either or whatever. So,
You
yeah.
reminded me of something too, because even in a recent project, it was a team coaching initiative that I did over the summer, and excuse me, when I was doing individual interviews with each of the team members, because that's part of the deal. You give a confidential one-on-one coaching.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot tell you. Based on what you just said, you reminded me of how many people felt siloed. They felt like,
Mm-hmm.
and they weren't being negative about it. They were just making an observation, like, yeah, we're siloed. Like, I don't know where my contribution falls in the grand scheme of things. Like, I don't really know how this is impacting other parts of the organization or the team or whatever. And that
Well,
is
that does affect motivation, by the way.
I was about to say, because
Yeah,
I could see how it would be an honest mistake to overlook that and think, well, nobody cares about it. But they do, because people do want to know that they meaningfully contributed to something, and how did that play out. And it was interesting, because when you were just saying that, I'm like, oh, that reminds me of some of the findings from those interviews. And when I did the report and I presented it to the leaders of that team, and they were like, okay.
yeah,
It's like they weren't deliberately trying to keep people. There was no malicious intent, or and it was just an
sure.
oversight. They, they
Mm-hmm.
they just didn't think about it, and it wasn't anything that was done intentionally to keep people siloed. It just happened that way because, in the absence of a deliberate framework to
Mm-hmm.
ensure that, things tend to naturally silo. And then,
Right.
as a result, when things silo, that leads to frustration, lack of understanding of each other and the roles that they're doing, lack of understanding about how your contribution impacts the whole. And it might be really subtle, but yes, indeed, that does affect motivation, and that infects that affects engagement, and that falls under the big umbrella of employee satisfaction. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, wow. Well, we have really covered a lot today. So I just, like, we've talked for an hour now about internal service quality, and I could keep talking about it, but we're not
We
going to,
can.
because
We
we're out of
could. We
time.
could. And touch upon a number of things that maybe we didn't mention, but we did cover a lot of territory in this conversation. Um, yeah.
Well, I thank you for your input and your insight, and I really love how we've got these backgrounds that we're coming from different places. I think it's a nice mixture. I'd like to see you bring your insights from your experience to these conversations, and I like talking about where we've been and what we've done and what we've seen.
Yeah. What we've experienced. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I hope that this has been an enjoyable podcast for the audience. And if
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
don't mind, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our channel. Hit like on this video. That would really help us out. And I will ask, like I always do, if you would like to make a suggestion about a topic that's related to organizational development and performance and corporate things of that nature, please drop us a note in the comments and we will entertain that thought. So until next time, I want to thank everybody. Join our conversation. Follow us at whitewolfinc.com, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thank you all. Have a powerful and productive day today.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin.